Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is the behavioral model sync up for Dash. Thursday morning, September 22nd, sorry, I think it's 22nd, 2022, and the behavioral model sync up um, uh, agenda. We don't have a predefined agenda at this moment, so we will keep it open, and anybody has anything to bring up, and we can go from there. And also share my screen that the task items that we are tracking for Dash behavioral model. Anybody have anything to present today? And these are the task items. Anything we want to discuss? Mukesh, Marianne?
Yeah, I think there should be a new item that I can assign to myself to add support for bulk APIs as we discussed yesterday.
Oh, okay, that's great. I'll make a note of that.
Marianne, Roldemary speaking. So any idea when the bulk API can be available in the BMV2? As I understand, this is related to the BMV2 implementation, right?
Not BMV2 itself, it's just the SAI implementation for BMV2.
Okay.
So it's about 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Also, there is the ACL rules support in the SAI implementation for BMV2.
Mm-hmm.
That also needs to be supported. That's an open item.
Okay. So this has to be added in the tracking list, right?
So I had raised an issue recently. I know, does that automatically get added here? I'm not sure.
Okay, let us see. Backlog drafting in progress. I see IPv6 here. IPv6 options though, not ACL. Okay. ACL is in general, right? Not just IPv6 ACLs, right, Mukesh?
No, yeah, general ACL rules.
Got it. Maybe I should click on this. Planning. Okay, this has more
So it's
information.
in the GitHub issues.
GitHub issues. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have to like explicitly add it here, probably.
I will make a note of that and add it here. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to make modification here, so I'm going to make the notes and hand it to Christina, and she'll be able to probably add it when she's back.
Thanks.
Welcome. Okay. Yeah, I see IPv6 connection tracking support. IPv6 routing support is fine. I wasn't sure if IPv6 connection tracking, etc., was also required for Dash. Is it immediately required or is it for later? Would we know? Is IPv6 in general required?
It's part of overlay IPv6 support. It doesn't make sense to have IPv6 routing in ACL without connection tracking.
Yes. Okay.
Well, partially in terms of testing, it makes sense to have them separate because we can do packet-based tests, but not the flow-based tests. Then When we will go to the flow-based test, then we will need IPv6 for connection tracking supported as well.
Sounds good. I think fragmentation handling is something that we had previously discussed, that fragmentation will not be required. It's not today required for v4, so probably not required for v6 as well. And we can mark this as yellow or something that is not immediately needed. Okay. Any other topics that we want to bring up today? Any questions, any PR that we want to look up, issues, etc.?
Hey, Reshma, this is Bud. I created an issue yesterday asking about the inbound routing table and scale. I don't know if anyone in this meeting could address the questions I brought up. So there were two parts of it. So one, I saw that about a month ago there was a change to the inbound routing table keys, and the E&I was added as one of the keys. And I'm sure, I think Marion might have done this. And I'm sure that I saw in the change, it was moved from the PA validation table to the inbound routing table. And I'm fairly confident that it was the right change to make, but I just wanted to ask the question again. If the E&I should be one of the keys in that table, because there was a link to the documentation describing the lookups that should be done, and the E&I was not one of the fields listed. It was only the VNI and an optional SIP prefix.
Right. I have also seen VNI there. Yeah.
And this is for which table again?
The inbound routing.
Inbound routing. Yeah, so I think the documentation is wrong here. And if I will find the pull request, I believe there is even a comment by Prince that the documentation is wrong. So let me check that quickly. I'll try to bring up the relevant pull request with the comments in a moment.
Yeah, I remember there was a comment. There were two pieces of documentation, and they were not in agreement on one of the points. But I didn't think it was on the disagreement was over the E&I field. I thought it was over something else. Let me try to find that quickly.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was about the LPM versus priority-based match.
Yeah, so I mean, if the E&I ID is supposed to be part of the table, and we know that for sure, I mean, that's fine. I just didn't see it in the documentation, and as I went to sort of implement this table, I mean, it's kind of a slightly different table. It's a little bit challenging to implement because it's partially exact match and partially TCAM, and so anything that could simplify it might be worthwhile to understand.
I think we had the same kind of questions as well, like what Bud is raising. Should it be actually for ENI or can it be global, the inbound routing?
Prince, are you
It's
able to
helpful
confirm
to-
the inbound routing? Because this is matching the schema. You have ENI there. Can you confirm that we need ENI in the inbound routing?
Yeah, I can confirm, but I think the inbound routing was set based on the requirements or the configs from the VNet team. So I believe the inbound routing table is tied to the ENI. So what is the concern if there is ENI there?
Can you open that issue that Bud raised? We can read it.
But it would be good if you can please share the screen with the issue.
Sure, let me do that.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'm sharing the right one. Can you see the
screen? Yes, 233.
Yeah. So there's a couple reasons I'm sort of asking this question about the ENI being a key field. One is that if it's not a key field, it's simpler to implement. So I wanted to just double check that it actually is required. The other is that.
So let's go one by one. But so first, why the ENI is required? So can you take the Sonic HLD? Can you share the Sonic HLD? I think yeah, the link that you have given in that same link, yeah. Yeah. So if you look at this, right, the based on incoming packets VNI, right, the direction is set up and maps to the corresponding ENI based on the inner destination MAC, right?
Yeah.
So once based on the inner destination MAC, it identifies the ENI. Then it looks up into the routing rule table that is associated to the ENI. So this is a priority based rule, and it's not a scaled rule like what we have for outbound. So maybe like let's say 100 rules or 200 rules like that. I don't know exactly the scale, but it's not a very high scale priority rule there here. So to match this flow, you find the ENI and then you look at the priority like rules based on priority associated to this ENI. So ENI must be a key here.
So, Prince, one question we have there is, let's say, I think that there is similar question in Bud's issue as well, but if two ENIs belong to the same VNet,
yeah,
would they have something like the same VNI pointing to two different VNets? So this inbound routing table is also used to kind of for the received VNI to identify a VNet, right?
Yeah, but that is mapped based on the inner destination MAC, right?
No, so the inner destination MAC is used to identify the ENI. That part is fine.
Yeah.
So now my question is, when a packet comes in, it comes in with a VNI, right?
Yeah.
From the remote. So we are using this inbound routing table to identify the VNet from that incoming VNI, right? So the prefix, the source IP, the source PA, and the VNI put together, we are using that to identify a VNet. So would this change for each ENI? I'm assuming the source PA and VNI, incoming VNI is going to be kind of unique, right? It's not going to be different for each ENI. So why should we have a per ENI entry for this? It's a replicated entry.
Okay, so let me show you something. Let me check. I see your point whether the inbound routing. So if you scroll down, right, like what are the fields that you are derived from? No, scroll down all the way further in the inbound route table.
Okay, I'm not sure how.
Further down. There is an inbound route table. Yeah, this is out. Yeah, this is the inbound, right? Okay. So here, based on the VNI and the PA, you derived the VNet, right?
Yeah. So this, yeah, question is, can this be like global or something? Because for a given source PA and VNI,
Mm-hmm.
the VNet is going to be globally unique.
Yeah, but see, you can also specify the VNet here, right? If you want. Like that is provided as part of this option, right?
Yeah, so that was the question. So since we are identifying the VNet here,
Mm-hmm.
that would be that wouldn't be different for each for each ENI, right? It's going to be the same because it's based on the incoming VNI. Why would it be different for each ENI is the question. Why would we need a separate entry?
I can double check that, but I see the question here, but I see that the current configurations are associated to ENI based on the rules, and the number of rules are not that high. So, but from a lookup standpoint, even if ENI is not there, what are the action types? Decap or drop? Okay. So that's another thing, right? If the routing rule, okay, okay, here is another problem I can see, right? If the inbound routing rule is not per ENI, then the route action, if it has to be different, then we have a problem, right? Like unless the VNI's prefix action is dropped for all ENIs. So that's one concern. Let's see what other thing is there. Protocol may not be an issue. PA validation can also be generic. And the other thing is, yeah, so the other thing is this metering bucket. This also is per ENI. So based on the action type and metering bucket, I mean, like what I'm saying is, this is my thought, but I can come back after discussing with the internal team. But to me, it looks like if we have to have a unique action type and metering bucket, then it has to be tied to the ENI.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be great if we can.
Yeah.
So
I can.
So one question is, in the key, the ENI, does it have to be compulsory or it can be like a star attribute?
No, ENI is compulsory.
I see.
Prefix is not compulsory, I think. I forgot, yeah. But yeah, can you scroll to the right? Maybe I think we have written something about. So ENI, VNI prefix, ENI inbound route table with the VNI and optional source PA prefix. Yeah, so that means the prefix is optional. So the parsing logic will first take the value after the first colon as ENI for sure. So cannot be it cannot be left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the duplicate problem is still the duplicate entry problem.
Yeah, but I think so my question is, why is there a concern with duplicate entry if the number of entries are limited?
Can I ask why there's only a few hundred entries in the table?
So that's what yeah, like I said, right, the exact scale number I can get back, but when I came up with this table, I remember the expectation was like limited number of inbound routing rule. So when I say limited, I'm just comparing it to the outbound route rule, which is at the 100K or that scale, but inbound route rule is not that high scale.
So on the outbound side,
this is the
go
PA,
ahead.
right? Not the CA address. So
yeah, not the
that's
CA
why
address. So it's a PA.
scale is lesser that.
Yeah.
But
The PA and only
outbound
the
mapping
VNI,
is,
right? So sometimes there is PA, sometimes there is VNI. So both are limited numbers.
So on the outbound side, the outbound, I guess, mapping table, routing table, sort of indicate the VNI to put on the outgoing packet. And I think here we're on the inbound side, we're looking at that incoming VNI and trying to like validate it to make sure it's that VNI is allowed in, right? So I actually don't have a good feel for on the outbound side, what's the number of different VNIs that could be in play in all these different outbound tables. And I guess maybe that's the same way as asking, like, how many different VNIs do we need to recognize on the inbound side? I think you're saying it's only a couple hundred.
Yeah. So one thing I can do is I can get back to you on that issue and also provide the expected scale for the inbound in that and maybe update it here in the document.
Okay, that would be great.
But if like I think this per ENI is the expectation and the requirement.
Okay.
So
yeah, I can see if the
There's
action has to be any per ENI action. That makes sense.
yeah.
So when you go
follow-up question.
go ahead. Well, I was just going to follow up on the scale. If you look at the issue that I raised in GitHub, I asked about the scale in a couple different ways, like total number of entries, like the SIP prefix is optional, but I mean, in theory, it could be specified for every entry. There's nothing stating that it would not be. Like, how many entries do you expect would actually have SIP prefixes and things along those lines?
How many prefixes is that?
Yeah, I mean, say we say the inbound routing table, say we expect it'll have 200 entries, and the SIP prefix is optional.
Yeah.
How many of those entries of those 200 do we think will have SIP prefixes? Is it
that's a very granular question, but I don't know. Like I think that maybe the VNet folks can answer better how they are going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if it's the worst case, if I mean without any other information, we have to assume the worst case.
So to me, if you look at the explanation that I gave in the inbound routing table, the prefix match is required if the packet is coming from a different region. So how many regional peerings are happening with this ENI is what determines the prefix, because that's when we want to distinguish between within the region versus outside region. So based on the number of regions, like it will be like 10 or 15 or so that much is what we can, like, if there are a lot of peerings with the different regions. Yeah, but if you want, I can check what is the max that can happen with the prefix.
For instance, this table only for different regions?
No. What I'm saying is the optional SRC PA prefix is the question, right? Like, how many entries will have that PA prefix specified?
Oh, so if it's intra-region, then we don't even have a prefix.
We may not even have a prefix. So
okay.
The one with prefix is across region. So that level of peering, I'm not sure like how much is the scale today, but I probably can get the max that can happen.
Okay.
Yeah, but that also will be like a couple of like tens or 40, that 10 to 40, that range.
Okay, that helps.
So the question that I had was, what is the need for the priority in this table? So we have this optional source PA prefix, so which means there could be entries with ENI, source PA, and VNI, right? Or there could be entries with ENI and VNI only, without source PA prefix. Now, can there be an entry with, let's say, ENI source PA, VNI1, and ENI without source PA, same VNI1? And you're saying VNI1, the one without source PA has higher, like what is the use case for
that's right.
having?
That's exactly the point. Because
then why do we even have that entry, right? The entry with the source P is not even needed in that case. So why do we even have that?
No.
Because
so let's
they
say,
map to different VNets.
Yeah, they map to different VNets.
Sorry, my question is, so it's the same VNI.
Yeah.
Right?
So same VNI, let me tell you, Mukesh, same VNI, okay, map to VNet, VNI1 map to VNet1, okay? But VNI1 and prefix, no, hold on. So that is, let's say, priority 10, okay? The next is VNI1 with prefix 1 map to VNet 11, okay? So that is at a higher priority. Okay. So now tell me, if priority is not there, how do we make the differentiation?
So are you okay? So my thinking was that anything that is more like has a source prefix has higher priority than
No.
one
That
doesn't have.
how can that happen in the routing table if it is not LPM based? This is not LPM based, right?
So the priority is just a way to say that consider anything with source PA as a higher priority. So you'll never have a case where the one without the source PA has higher priority. That will never happen, right?
That will never happen. That should not happen ideally by this solution. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because it was kind of intuitive even without priority that with source PA is higher priority. But okay, so you're saying the priority is just a way to enforce it.
Yeah.
Okay, but I guess in the implementation, if this semantic is maintained, we should be good enough, right? I mean,
if prefix is provided, then use that.
Yeah, because I think that TCAM with priority in hardware implementation versus without priority, there's a significant difference in terms of hardware implementation. So I guess what we're saying is, if we are maintaining the semantic that with prefix is with source PA prefix automatically get higher priority than the entries without, then is it safe to assume that priority, we can ignore priority what comes from the top?
No, actually, I wouldn't fully agree to that, because in most cases, yes, the idea here is a prefix and VNI can be at a higher priority than the one with VNI or VNI alone. But if there is some special treatment required for a special VNI, then it is possible that with this schema that can take a higher priority, right? So,
but if the one without VNI has higher priority, then you don't even need the one with the prefix. Right? You can just remove the other entries.
No, that depends on the priority field, right? No, hold on. That depends on the priority field.
No, but if you get any packet with that VNI, it's going to hit that entry, right? So then you don't even need any of the other entries because they are never going to get hit.
So Mukesh, the point is, with this model, I can have VNI1 prefix 1 at a high priority, VNI at a second priority, and VNI1 prefix 2 as a third priority. Right. I can have all different combinations here without any restrictions, and can be used by the northbound, versus in reality the 90 or 99% of the cases will be VNI with prefix is at a high priority. But I don't know if we can do an assumption here and make it as a limitation or hard, hard-coded rule in the hardware. When
I think Mukesh's point was if you had that in your example, Prince, for example, you had a VNI prefix as one entry, priority, higher priority, then there is just a VNI, and then there is prefix 2 as the next this thing. I think Mukesh's point was that last one will never get hit because the second one will always be the catch-all entry, right?
Correct, but the point is that is all determined by the priority field, right?
It's just an optimization that you can do. That's true, but it remains the fact that this is a generic definition of the table. That's all, right?
Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is we can achieve it by just deleting off the other entry, because if you're anyway giving higher priority to the one without the source PA prefix, then you don't need the ones with the source PA with the lower priority. You can keep the one with the higher priority, but you don't need the ones with the lower priority because it's going to be masked anyway.
Yeah, but then if I have to delete the one with the high priority, then I need to again re-add the one with the low priorities, right?
I mean, one case would be, for instance, that temporary. So you have a bunch of prefixes, rules, and then one catch-all, I guess, on the VNI. And then maybe SDN wants to change the configuration and suddenly just allow for temporary just to have just VNI at a higher priority, and then remove it. You still leave the other ones behind too. I mean, it gives the control plane flexibility about how to do things. From a data plane standpoint, it's just a bunch of rules with their priority like a TCAM, right? So now you can do optimizations if you know that you see a VNI higher priority without prefix. Obviously, you don't need the other ones, but you don't know when that one's going to be removed. You might have to push back the other ones too. So you don't control that.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. So yeah, just the question was in terms of use case, do we actually need that? That was my original question. I guess the answer is not really, but we still want the flexibility.
That's right. So I see that the most use cases is with prefix as a high priority, but yeah, it's not something that we can expect all the time. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification of the fields. I have made some notes to compare, but I guess this answers the question. So moving to any other questions that we have?
Hey, Reshma, this is Chris. Hi, everyone. You know, in our talks about some of the test cases that we're doing, you know, we have some other activities going on behind the scenes where we're trying to develop test cases for the model. And the test case developers are running into problems with the pipeline behavior or incompleteness of the model. So they can't really continue or complete the test cases. I'm wondering if we need to, you know, get some of this on the table at some point, maybe not in this meeting, but have a list of all the test cases and why they can't be developed and create issues for those and get some kind of a, you know, consensus in the group. How do we tackle this?
Why not? This is what this meeting is about.
Oh, okay. What I meant was, I don't know if we'll have time in today's meeting to go over the issues in detail. What I meant is just get a consensus on the approach we ought to take. You know, for example, I know that Vladimir had a list of a whole bunch of test cases he wanted to develop, but it seemed like he was stymied for most of them. And I know Anton has also has a test case he's working on that he's going to file an issue for. So do you think the best thing is just to methodically break this down into issues one at a time so we can track them and then decide as a group how we want to tackle those? Does that seem like a good process?
Yeah. And can I clarify, is the problem with implementing use cases because not all of the software is there? Or the problem is that there are bugs and test cases are failing?
I think it's going to be a mix. And, in some cases, there's detailed explanation of why it doesn't work and what they think the problem might be in the pipeline. And in other cases, maybe it's incomplete. For example, if we don't have all the features we need. So I think it's going to be a case by case basis. So what I'm suggesting is the test case developers articulate each one of these as one issue, and then we can triage those. Maybe some of the experts can weigh in on the issues list even offline, because they'll be able to just quickly either answer it or say yes, this needs attention, or it's going to be handled in the future, and then we can prioritize the effort. Because I think one goal is we need to define, let's say, a roadmap towards completion of the behavioral model. I'm thinking that's one thing we lack, is maybe a good idea of a roadmap that we all agree to. Like, here's a sequence of releases with certain features or enhancements or capabilities that we're going to add progressively. Maybe I'm simply unaware of that roadmap and other people know it, but I think we're lacking kind of like a release roadmap in a way. That seemed like we could almost treat this like a set of software releases that we can then say by such and such a release, we'll call it 0.1 or 0.0.1. We'll have this thing working, and we're going to write test cases to prove that it works. And at that point, that release is quote unquote done. I just think we need maybe a little more process here. Does anyone have any?
This sounds this sounds like a good idea, Chris. I think we do need to start with filing issues, as you mentioned, and then we need to triage them. We need to discuss them, and then I think we were, in my view, I guess, somewhat premature in declaring that okay, we are complete, or we have either completed, or we have basically by just writing the P4 code and saying that okay, we have the behavior model for at least one use case completed. As we all know, unless it's tested, it's broken, in my view, right? Since we did not have, was not tested, I think we cannot declare this is done. And then now it's high time that if we have test cases for the same use case, we have to really ensure that okay, those test cases pass. Then we can say that okay, yeah, now we can say it is either we have completed one use case like VNet, and I completely agree whether we call it a release or whatever the milestone that may be, but I think there has to be some gates to say that okay, if unless we pass all these test cases or some sort of other gate, then can we only say that we are done.
Yeah, I think we've been doing a lot of improvising, while this thing takes shape. But I think we need to kind of, let's say, get to the next level of managing this. And again, I think maybe coming up with some dot releases, and then once those are working and a test case passes, we can say, okay, we'll tag that in the repo like a release. And we do it all the time with internal projects. Start at 0.0.1 and move forward. And I think by making that list and the roadmap, it'll put a lot of clarity into what's important to us and what order. Do we want to get VNet out working final, which seems to be real close, VNet in, etc. There's all these different features, PA validation, CA validation, the whole sequence of test cases, for example, that I know Vladimir has been working on. We could look at that and say, well, let's address those in a certain order and let's assign those milestones to dot releases or something. So I just wanted to get that conversation going. And then besides the pipeline, yesterday's meeting brought up issues about the completeness of the libsci and the management interface to the behavior model. Right now it supports create and remove operations only, scalar, not bulk, no get, no set. So are we happy with that? Do we want to set higher goals? Who's going to do the work? What's the plan for that? I think that needs to be discussed at some point too. And then, of course, once we make some agreements on an overall plan, then we can get into deep dives on each issue like we did today, on the behavior. So I just want to throw that out there because I don't know where we're at and where we're going, myself. And maybe that's just me, but I think we need a little bit of some documentation that shows our plan of record.
Yeah, completely agree. As Hanif was also mentioning, maybe it is a good time to start tracking the issues, filing the issues, and then discussing them in detail. And Chris, as you mentioned, for the high level goals, do you think we should track them here in this table?
Well, I think we need to make a plan first.
Okay.
And then work items will come out of
But
that.
I think we have a plan. It's called a test plan.
Well, is that a plan of what order we're doing them in and what's the priority? And
priority, yeah, we can assign priority. I can propose one way to assign priorities first. The first would be the test cases that can run but fail. Second would be the test cases that cannot run because there is some of the implementation missing. And third would be test cases that cannot even be done because we are missing some APIs in the first place. We can start by fixing what was supposed to be working but fails first.
Now, when you say we have a plan, that's the test plan. Are you referring to the pull request that's been submitted recently? Or what is the test plan that you're referring to?
The Anton's test plan, the one that we just reviewed? Okay.
Okay, so that'll be the plan of record. And then what we'll do, should we break that into some kind of cadence or, dot releases saying these are associated with a certain release plan, because that'll kind of give an ordering to things. We don't want to work on the least important feature first, right? So that's part of the plan too.
The second part that Marianne mentioned, the implementation could be missing for the test case. Yeah, for that, if there is further deep dive, but I guess the complete plan there may not be available right at the beginning, but we can identify some of the implementation that may be missing that we have identified right now and put them down in priority order, and then keep adding to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the test plan would be kind of, this is the goal. We want all these things working, but it's not really an action plan, right? For the teams. Yeah. It's just a goal. It's the definition of what the output should be. What we need is a work plan. And yeah, I agree that how to triage and prioritize into rough categories. We don't want to put something that needs a lot of software development at the top of the list necessarily, or that's going to be coming later down the road. But I just think we need this kind of thing kind of stated so that everyone understands what it is, so we can be working, rowing in the same direction.
Mm. Agree. Maybe we can come up with something and discuss together next time.
Sure. Yeah, if someone wants to propose something, and then we can interact outside of the meetings. I think a lot of work gets done between meetings.
I just wanted to add one thing. So some time ago I asked about when to file the issue. So maybe in this case we can start filing issue on the Dash repo first, and then open the follow-up issues if needed on other repos. But we will be able to track the each of the issue on the Dash repo. I think that it makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. These are Dash issues. Yeah, I think these are Dash issues, right? The issues against the pipeline model, let's say, or a test case for it. I know it takes kind of the fun out of it, having to nail down the process, but it's how we're going to get it done.
So guys, I have a question. I joined the meeting a little late, so I missed the test plan review. So I guess with every feature or release or whatever have you, right? We have these test plans with which is comprised of certain number of test cases, right? And we review to ensure that it covers end to end. It's pretty comprehensive. It essentially is going to provide a full coverage of all the cases that we need to test, right? So do we want to really have a PR that people can review and put their comments, and also maybe perhaps suggest more test cases before we say that, okay, we do have the entire test plan, and then this way becomes a plan of record?
Yeah, Hanif, actually, Anton did not present it today. I think he had presented in the Dash meeting at some point. But totally agree that there is a PR for that, and we should add comments to it and solidify it, and we should all agree on that plan, and then actually close on it sometime soon.
I just pasted the link.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Reshma. So yeah, and of course, there'll be the test cases that are going to be developed and run, and people can volunteer to do those test cases, implement the test cases, and then show that, okay, if they are not passing for the implementation that is there, then of course there are the issues that we can file. But for those cases for which the implementation does not exist, we should have a some sort of a guideline or a rule that, hey, once the implementation comes into play, then that implementation should accompany that test case as well along with it. So it becomes the onus on the person who is actually doing the implementation of the particular feature or particular use case to also bring in the test case that is already defined in the test plan.
Yeah, I agree. For the future implementations, once the implementation is completed with the identified items that are missing in the test, the future implementation, and the features, definitely it will be, yeah, we should ask for the feature owner to come up with the test case. That'd be really great, yeah.
Thanks, Raj.
Yeah, and I think I like that plan. And the initial test case that accompanies a feature doesn't necessarily have to be exhaustive. It should be at least prove the basic feature enough to satisfy and also to catch regressions later. And we'll take some of these sort of seed crystal test cases, like we have the VNet out, and people will take those and expand on them and use them as the starting point for more exhaustive tests. So it's real important to get that first test case that can teach, let's say, test people who might want to focus just on the testing, sort of take their cue from the initial test or tests and build on it, because sometimes it requires a lot of deep understanding of the feature or the behavior of the pipeline. And the best way to get that is the first test case that the expert creates.
Yeah, that sounds
good. Yeah, just same thing. If any implementation for sub features, if there is no test case that's there already that covers it, then it'll be good to add it right away.
Yeah, good.
Sounds good. Any other topics to discuss today?
I have few questions to the pipeline behavior model, but I'm not sure if Prince can stay at this meeting. Prince, so can you stay like a few minutes? I have just a few questions.
If we can cover something in the next 5 minutes, we can cover that, and then we can keep the rest for the next meeting too.
Yeah, we can cover next meeting also. So I am pretty much okay.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to ask any one question, Vladimir Mitnick, or you want to do it
I
next
have a few one, but so maybe just a quick question. We have 4 minutes probably about the VM, VNI, and VNet. So my question is why we cannot use for the invent, for example, the VNet ID and look up the VNI instead of the VM VNI, and why do we need this VM VNI? Because from my perspective, it looks like the same field, I would say, because once we create the we set the VNI ID there, so VNI hold the VNI. So why do we need VM, VNI there? Can we just do VNI lookup?
It's a different
for the
tunnel.
invent also?
It's a different tunnel. So there are VNIs that are for the tunnels between, basically when you're doing the VNet routing, when you are going from one VM to another. So if you imagine a more simplified case where DPU is sitting on the host itself, or basically the host is doing all of the isolation and the policies, you will not see the VM VNI because it's a tunnel that is a result of having NIC physically separated from the host where the VM is running. And this is a specially assigned or reserved VNI. And it's a different value from VNI that you see in the outbound or in the inbound.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Marian. Another question is about the outbound routing. So we have for the routing table, we have the direction like route direct, action route direct for the outbound routing. And once this action is executed, so we have to do the routing based on the underlay routing, right? So the question is, what the information from the packet we have to use for the routing lookup? I mean, that should we use the underlay routing and VXLAN header for underlay routing, or there should be some specific kind of underlay records for route direct? Because as you may know, the route direct is actually doing decap, and the packet goes from the appliance as a decapsulated. So then the routing should be happen. So the question is, do we need to have some specific like routing table for that decapped packet, or we should reuse the let's say original packet and do the routing as for other packets? Not sure you understand my question correctly.
Is the question, yeah.
How is that different from routing a VXLAN packet if you do a VNet route? In any case, the routing itself is done always on the underlay IP header. So whatever the underlay IP header is at the time.
So for the routing, the route direct, we're also doing the underlay routing based on the VXLAN header anyway, right?
Not the VXLAN. You stripped VXLAN at that point.
Yeah. But we have to do this routing before, right? Before the stripping.
No, after. So you stripped, and then so the problem here is that not really what you do when you do the underlay routing. But underlay routing should be after the overlay routing, basically. So you need to do the outbound routing, then the resulting action, either it is VXLAN NCAP for VNet route, or it is nothing for the case of a direct route. In any case, you do the underlay routing after that. But the problem here, yeah, same as with the VNet route. You first do VXLAN NCAP, then you do underlay routing. But the problem here is that there isn't really effectively any routing done in this case, because DPU is connected to two identical switches. So you don't really care on which port you egress, as long as the packets for the same flow egress the same port to avoid reordering. And if the network doesn't care about reordering, you can even egress on different ports. So you can even boil this down to having a DPU with one port. So what underlay routing can be done on one port? Nothing, you just egress.
Okay, but you had 2 ports. You said that we still can forward this packet to the another port. So in this case, we have to have the underlay routing. So it means that for the encapsulated packet, we still have some specific underlay routing entries, right? To be able to route them to
so
egress.
What is effectively programmed is ECMP on those 2 port router interfaces. That's what Sonic programs. Because the DPU isn't sitting somewhere on the edge of the network, nothing like that. It's just 2 identical TORs that it is connected to. Or in the case of the, let's take another interesting example, the smart switch. Then the DPU is sitting inside a switch and it is connected to one switch. So effectively a DPU with 1 port connected to a switch. In that case, the real underlay routing will be done on the switch. DPU just does packet transformations and underlay routing is done on the switch.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a similar story even if DPU is discrete. So different tactics can be done there, but the result will be the same. You can do underlay routing on 2 ports with ECMP. You can do ECMP hashing if you want to. You can just have a hash algorithm to be like egress port equals ingress port. Basically, do the hairpinning. Result will be the same.
But Marian, one thing is that for inbound routing, right, for inbound VNet, we do call what we call routing, and we do look at the underlay, underlay address for the PA validation, right? So there is
but that's not
system, right?
That's not the. This is still the. We look at the outer header. That is true, but that's not what is defined as underlay routing. This is still overlay routing. It's part of overlay routing.
Okay.
Yeah, understood. But I think there is. I don't know whether the question was to do with basically there is some sort of a routing. We do say that okay, we are going to do by looking at underlay 1, which is to just whether or not we are going to admit the packet for a further processing. And then if that is the way, then I mean that's probably the explanation, I guess.
Yeah, but then after that, you again have like if you look at the full. If you would like to build a full theoretical pipeline, you would have inbound routing. Then you would have packets stripped after you validated that this packet is allowed. You strip the VXLAN. Then you go along with the inbound pipeline. You see that this packet belongs to some ENI. Then you do VXLAN NCAP that from that ENI determines the VNI towards the host and PA of the host. And you put another VXLAN header. And after that, you again have the what's called a regular underlay routing. So basically determine the egress port.
So the underlay routing should be executed at the end all the time. Doesn't matter outbound or inbound packet, right?
Yeah, because the result of underlay routing eventually is the same as in switch. You determine what is the egress port.
Sounds good. We are a very good discussion today, and we are over time. So if we, can meet next time and continue this discussion, that'd be really great. But really, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye for now.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.